We are going to get started with SSRS, and one of the ways to create a new project is pretty simple. Go to new, go to project, and what we essentially have to select is the new report project. Okay, so I'm going to new, that's my project, go to reporting services, and we're going to go ahead and select report server project. Click on OK. It's creating the project, and now I can see report server project has been created. Okay, so that's report. This is reporting services. We're going to completely talk about the final piece of the BI puzzle where we are generating reports for the end users, and indeed it's a very crucial part, because it's one thing to have your data in one place, it's one thing to do performance tuning, but it's quite another thing to make sure that users get to know what stuff you built. I mean, if you cannot present your data properly, everything, I mean, the whole purpose of a data warehouse is defeated. Okay, so reporting indeed is a very central aspect of SSIS. Okay, so a few quick things here: data sources, data sets, and reports. You can see these are the primary components, very important components of reporting services. And I'm going to come through and talk about each one of these things. And just to start off with, I'll show you how to create a simple report. And the way you create a report is right-click on the reports, go to Add. So you see an Add New Report section here. This will basically open up a wizard for you. This is going to open up a wizard where you can click Next, you can enter your details, and you can go accordingly. But the other way of doing it is just go to Add, just go to New Item, and say Report. That's going to create a report from scratch. It's basically going to open up a empty canvas for you where you're going to start developing your report from scratch. And again, when you go to add new item, you still see the report wizard. If you click on report wizard, it'll again bring up that same wizard option menu for you. And you click on next, you'll be able to configure all these options, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with building a report from scratch from an empty canvas. So we're going to click on this report, and we're going to click on add. And once we do that, you're going to see the report designer interface opens up, and the design environment comes up in the middle. That's your design section. So you will design the report here, and as and when you design some items, you'll go to preview and see what your temporary report looks like. So that's what the preview is for. And to the left, you see the report data section. It's very important, which contains the data sources, the data sets, the images, parameters, which are specific for the particular report that you're building. And one more interesting thing is just note the extension of that report, report1.rdl. Yep. If you note the extension of that report, that's how a report file is stored in your local drive. That's a .rdl file, report definition language. Okay. The first thing that we're going to essentially do is try to create a data source, and the way to data source is very similar to what we've already talked about. It's just like a connection manager. Okay, so how do you create a data source? Just right click on it, add data source. See the name is data source 1. You can give the name of your choice, embedded connection, SQL Server. It's a SQL Server data source that we have because we're going to connect to our data warehouse, right? So the reporting services is used to create reports. But what is your source? What is the source of the reports? The source of the reports is basically SQL Server. The data warehouse is what you're using as the source. I'm going to select SQL Server, go to Edit, use Windows authentication, click on the server name, that's dot, load up AdventureWorks, and that's your connection string. Okay, click on OK, and your data source is configured. Now, it's one thing to connect to a data source. This is just like your connection manager, but you still got to go back and specify what all tables you want to select from that particular database. So database is where you're just referencing the database, but then you still have to go back and say what tables, what tables you want to reference. That is something you perform using datasets. You have to add a dataset. Again, you can give it a name, or you can leave it as a dummy name. Okay, it's a pretty simple concept, but I will go ahead and say embedded. So embedded basically means, and by default, whatever you see in the report data section, that means the stuff is embedded in that report. So it's not really shared. So it's just like if you create a variable inside one package, that variable is not accessible outside of that package. Okay, so when you say embedded, so whatever you see in that report data section is embedded for that particular report. So that data source is not available, or that data set is not available for let's say if I create another report, report2.rdl, that stuff will not be available for report2.rdl, right? Makes sense. So in order to create a data set, obviously again you need to go back and define your source, on top of which source do you want to create a data set, because data set is basically a subset of your source, because data source is what is pointing to your database, right? It's just like your connection manager. Connection manager always points to a database, right? So data source is something that's pointing to your database, but then data set is something that's really it's a subset of your data source. So essentially it's a select query where you're going to choose your tables, what all tables to take. It's just like a result and result set query. It's a select query. And how do you specify the SQL query? That's something that you do here. This is the part where you actually go back and define what that data result set that your data set is going to return. So you can go to the query designer, pretty straightforward. You can write a SQL query and you can go back and configure whichever kind of query you would want to pick up. Query designer, let's say for this purpose I want fact internet sales. Select fact internet sales and I'll go back and select team product. Click on add. Click on close. Say I want to select star, or maybe you want to select some specific columns. So let's say I've already done a join on product and internet sales. But what I want to really find out is the sales amount. I'm not really doing a group by. Please note I'm not doing a group by. I'm just extracting values from the tables. I'm taking sales amount, I'm taking color, and I'm taking English product name. I could have done the same thing by just selecting the columns from here. Okay, so click on OK, and you can see that these are the 3 fields that are being retrieved from your result set. Okay, it's a simple SQL select query, and it's going to return a result set for you. The same SQL query, if you go back and run in Management Studio, the kind of results you will get, the same results are going to be assigned to your data set. That's what your data set is. Data set is nothing but a subset of your source. Okay, it's a subset of a query that you're writing pointing to that source, and source is nothing but a database, right? Makes sense? Go to fields, and in fields you'll be able to see that it highlights the 3 fields that I've actually put in my select query. So fields are nothing but those column names, the column names in your result set. So although you're querying 2 tables, but then you're only extracting these 3 columns in your select query. That is what will automatically get populated in the field section. So once you click on OK, you can see your data set is configured, and your data set consists of 3 fields, just as we discussed: sales amount, color, and English product name. All right, so far so good. So all this while we've been doing the background work of preparing our data. So preparing our database, preparing our data set, and essentially just making sure our query is proper. But the next step, as a next step, we're going to have to go back and analyze how that data is being presented. Okay, what is the purpose of data sets when we have data source? Okay, as I said, it is essentially just a connection to your database. Data source is just like a connection manager. Okay, so from a reporting standpoint, you need to go back and write a query. You cannot just use that whole database, right? So data source is just pointing to your database, and data set is what really kind of narrows it down to the set of tables that you're going to use in your report. So you can define multiple data sets. The data set 1, you can go back and say right click, you can add one more data set. And in this particular data set, what you're saying is, okay, it's again embedded, it's in the same source. So in the same source, you can use multiple data sets. And essentially, a data set is nothing but if you think from an analogy point of view, a data set is nothing but a select statement. It's just a SQL view. You can think of it that way, because it's just a select statement. Again, it go to query designer, and now what I want to do is, I want to add a table. And this time I want to take customer and fact internet sales. This time I want to select my first name, middle name, last name, select my marital status, gender, and from this table I want to select my sales amount. Okay, simple enough. So you can see that I have created 2 select statements now. In this particular, you can see the fields are 6 fields are taken. That's the query I've written. So in short, a data set is nothing but a stored select statement. It's just like a view, SQL view. Okay, it's a SQL view that you're going to eventually use in your reports. That's basically what a data set is. I can see that from the same source, which is from the same database, I've created 2 separate data sets. Now the obvious question is, what am I going to do with this? I mean, so far we have not really displayed the data. All we are seeing is, all right, so I've just created this stuff. So how are you going to display it? How are you going to go ahead and display this stuff? So the way to do that is, you need to get the toolbox up, right? You can see the toolbox is missing. The way to bring the toolbox up is go to view, and you can see the toolbox. That brings up your SSIS toolbox. Okay, try to dock it somewhere here. So I'll go ahead and dock it here, or you can also have it beside it. So that's another common way of having your box. Okay, you can see now that now I can see the toolbox. And what I really want to show you is the very first step of how to create a very simple table report. And the way to do that is to drag and drop a table from your toolbox. That's your designer interface. Drag and drop it onto the designer interface. You can see the first row are headers. Second row stands for data. I mean, second row onwards, you have the data rows that you're going to insert, data set 1, and you can just next step, as a next step, you're going to go back and drag and drop fields from your data set. So now you have the table. You have to go back and display something in your table. So what are you going to display? You're going to display stuff from your select query, right? Whatever you've selected, right, from your resultant data set, that is what you're going to display. Those corresponding fields are what you can display. Okay, so you can either go back and select it from here. You can see source. I have 2 data sets. It gives me the option. Okay, so which data set values you want to display? Either I can display values from data set 1, or I can display values from data set 2. So either one of the 2 options I can select. Okay. So either I can do this, or I can directly drag and drop from here. I can drag and drop onto here, and you can see that a small blue mark will come up, and I can just leave, and it will automatically have color inserted. Okay, something interesting happens. You can see color is embedded within square brackets in the second row, and the reason is because that points to a data row. Okay, if you see that the first is headers and the second is data. The other way to understand data rows is a small details icon that you see. The 3 dashes that you see, this stands for details. Okay, so you can see that in row groups, this really stands for details section. Okay, that's what you're able to see here. Now when you try to go here and try to expand this, you will not get that same option that you were getting before. You don't get to see the dataset 2 and the other options coming in. The reason is because dataset 2 no longer exists at this moment. Okay, so very, very important to understand that you don't have dataset 2 at this moment. Okay, because at any point in time, another very important concept, at any point in time, a table or any report object for that matter, these are all report objects. Okay, when you look at this toolbox, they are all SSRS objects. Okay, at any point in time, a particular report object can only get associated with a particular data set. Okay, you cannot have multiple data sets associated with it. So tablix, this is what we call a tablix. If you just go back to the properties section, the same as we saw for SSIS, the same as we saw for SSRS, you go to the properties section, you should be able to see that it is associated with a particular kind of data set. So if you click on the tablix again, click on the tablix, see the tablix is selected, and if you just go down, you'll be able to see that dataset name has been selected as dataset 1. You can of course go back and change it, but then at any point in time, it can only be associated with a single dataset. So you can see that right now it is associated with dataset 1, and which is why it's only going to pick up the 3 fields from dataset 1, which is sales amount, color, and English product name. Okay. So if I try to have something else from here, if I try to take something from dataset 2, you will see it gives me an error. It will tell me only fields from the current dataset can be added. All right. Let me go ahead and add in the remaining columns. I'll take English product name and I'll take sales amount. And what I want to do is to show you how to preview your data. You can simply go to preview and you can preview your data. And once you preview your data, you should be able to see that the values come up, the values are displayed. It takes some time to load, and what is happening basically is that if you remember there was a select query we wrote, right? In dataset we wrote a select query. It has to go back to the database. It has to query the data from your database, bring that to SSRS, and then SSRS displayed as a table. So it's a long process. So the loading time is basically the time it takes to query the data. And you can see that now it's the first instance of us creating a simple report, simple tabular report. All right. These are all detailed rows. And the way to understand that is if you just click on this, you will see that this detail section is listed out here. It means that row groups, you can see in row groups, I have not really added any groups. Okay, so it is displaying only detail level data. Okay, there are ways in which you can aggregate data, you can display groupings of data. There are ways you can do that, but here I'm simply displaying the detail level data. All right, and similarly, you can create one more table. You can create one more table object beside it. So you can take probably one more table object beside it. Maybe you can put it somewhere here, and you can parallelly display. You can parallelly display the first name. Again, you can either click on this icon, and you can again give you the initial 2 options. You can select a data set of your choice. Okay, you can either select a data set of your choice, or you can go back here and drag and drop the fields directly from here. Okay, either way you can do it. So maybe I want to drag and drop the fields from here, and moment I do that, moment I take the first field, it is automatically associated that with dataset 2. Now if you click on the TableX properties for this, so why do I call it a TableX? So and essentially why it's called a TableX is because it's a table, matrix, and a list. It's a combination of a table, a matrix, and a list. That's why it's called a TableX. Okay, so you can see that the three different kinds of items. It's a table, there's a matrix, and there's a list. So that's why it's to combine all of it. It's called a TableX. Right? Makes sense? So you can see that when you click on this TableX, you'll see that in dataset section, it is selected as dataset 2, which is what it is right now. Okay, you can see that the first name, take the marital status, you can take the gender, and now all of a sudden, if you see that, so this is the report body. So if you see this is the report body, and you click on this background, you see this is the body. So you can see that it's the body is slightly smaller. You can go ahead and expand it. You can of course expand it. This is the report. Okay, this is the report pane, but this is the report body. This is what people actually see. So essentially, you cannot drag and drop anything here, right? It's very intuitive, isn't it? You can't drag and drop a table here. That's your report. That's your reporting services interface. But then you can only drag and drop stuff in your body, right? This is where you can drag and drop stuff. So you make sure that you expand your body based on your requirements. So here I'm going to expand it slightly to the right, okay? And yeah, obviously I need one more column. I need to add one more column for sales amount. How do I do that? One way is to come here, right click and insert columns, or the other way is to simply take sales amount and bring it here until and unless, try to drag and drop it here until and unless you get a small blue icon, okay? And you can just release your mouse button and it will automatically be included, okay? The other way to do it is obviously you can take the value from here. Let's say you want to include middle name, you can take the value from here and you can place it somewhere in between and it will automatically put middle name there, right? And deleting a column is also fairly simple. Click on that column, right click and delete columns. Middle name stands deleted. Now if you go to preview, you'll be able to see two tables adjacent side by side. All right, simple enough up to this point. Few other quick properties. I'm going to go ahead and take a single table for convenience. I'm going to go ahead and remove this other table. Okay, just click delete on the keyboard. Make sure you select it properly and delete on the keyboard. Okay, and you go to preview again, you should be able to see the single table being displayed right now. Okay, there's some neat little formatting things you can do. Let's say, for instance, the first section here, you want to edit the title. You can go back and edit it. Just double click on it. Say color name. It's a product name. You can go ahead and call it product name. And maybe the final column you want to call it sales. Remove the amount. Just edit it. Maybe you want to color it. Select this whole column from here. And other things are pretty straightforward as you find in any pitch. Color each of the columns. Background color. You see that some of the fonts are listed here. You can see it's the foreground color and it's the background color. Let's say you want to add a background color of light blue. You can go ahead and add it and the preview will be automatically displayed. Let's say you want to add, you want to make it bold, slightly bigger in size. Those kind of neat little formatting things you can achieve inside this tab. Okay, you can expand, collapse, you can do all this kind of stuff. Go to preview now. You should be able to see a slightly different kind of interface at this stage. What if you add a background color here? Obviously you can add a foreground color also. If you go to sales amount and if you add a foreground color of red, click on OK. Again, it's going to immediately display on your preview section here. What it basically means is going to color all the rows of for sales amount. Is going to make it red color. Okay, this is just a very brief example of how you can perform coloring. Okay, thank you.